Doctor Sleep is directed by Mike Flanagan and starring Ewan McGregor as the adult version of Danny, and it's following up on his life while also focusing on a cult of vampire-like people who basically want to find children with the ability to shine and suck the souls out of them. This film is honestly really underrated. It was not well received by critics when it released, and I think that's partially due to the fact that The Shining is one of the most iconic and respected horror films in history. So naturally, the expectations for a sequel to live up to it is very high. And I understand that high expectation. But a 59 Metascore and a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes? That is appalling. This is where I've just completely disconnected from critics, to be totally honest. I honestly loved this film. I thought it was a brilliant way to do a horror sequel. And I'll start off with some positives. I love the way they follow up on Danny's life and the way they portray how he is just so messed up from what happened. How he is dealing with issues of alcohol like his father was. How he's dealing with issues of drugs like he's addicted to cocaine and things like that. And he just lost order of his life because his childhood was so horrifying. I think the way they portrayed that was brilliant. And a lot of the first act of this film is very just depressing and grim almost. I also love how they went into some of the backstory with Danny's character and followed up on what happened after Wendy and Danny escaped the Overlook Hotel and Jack Torrance froze to death. And they actually went deeper into him as a character. You actually care for his character a lot more in this film than you do in, say, The Shining, because they really give him more depth. They develop him really well too. I loved his character in this film, and I actually really found myself caring for him. In The Shining, you didn't actually get a very massive exploration of the ability to shine, outside of a few of Danny's clairvoyant visions of the twins and his conversation with Dick Halloran. But other than that, there really wasn't that much exploration of it. Here in Doctor Sleep, you actually get a much broader scale of how the ability of shining affects children and how they respond to it. And they also use visual effects really well to give a more detailed perspective and depiction of how children see their ability to shine. That was brilliant. And they do bring in a lot more supernatural horror off of that compared to The Shining, which was much more psychological horror. And don't get me wrong, I love psychological horror. The Shining is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. But I do love how this film took a different direction and explored the more supernatural side, which was more true to Stephen King's vision. I loved Ewan McGregor as the adult version of Danny. He delivered a brilliant performance here. For one, he looks like what the adult version of Danny would be, but he also delivers a great performance with how he portrays the trauma from those events and how he's purely depressed and his concern for other children and how they could be dealing with disability and the vampire-like people that are trying to suck the souls out of them. His emotions felt very genuine and earned. I loved his performance here. And Kylie Curran delivers a brilliant child acting performance as Abra. The way she portrays her ability to shine and how it affects her daily life from everywhere to school and her life at home and her parents' concern for her and the visions that she sees, the clairvoyant visions of some really horrific events. The way she portrays it all was brilliant. She nailed it. I loved her performance here. And I also love her acting chemistry with Ewan McGregor and their conversations through Shining. They have to portray it like a normal phone conversation or something that they're used to experiencing in their everyday life, and they embody the ability so well. I also love how there's so many Easter eggs in this film, and it pays a lot of hints of homage to The Shining that most fans will catch if they've seen the original Shining. Although this film doesn't really require you to watch the first Shining because there's so much backstory given here. You'll also notice a lot of hints of The Shining's musical score throughout the film that's very satisfying, especially towards the final act where a lot of it is essentially fan service, but it's a good kind of fan service. Some people may argue that it's over-dependent on fan service, but I don't agree. I think it was very earned, and it worked within the story. I also love the ending to this film. I'm not going to spoil it or give it away, but it is great in the way that it maintains the same sense of ambiguity. Well, maybe not as effective as the ending to The Shining, but still really good. As far as issues with this film, I only have one, and it's revolving around certain reshoots that they had to do with lookalikes of Wendy, Jack, and Danny. And basically, there are two scenes that are already in the original Shining that, for some reason, they did a reshoot for. I guess just for better camera quality, but it felt completely unnecessary. Now, as far as doing like follow up scenes to the original Shining and following up on the lives of Danny and Wendy after the events of the first film, that's totally understandable. I understand why that was necessary, but otherwise, it didn't really make sense. I found that to be a strange decision. But really, that is just a minor nitpick. This is a very strong sequel that really gives a lot more emotional depth to the character of Danny, and I think this is the best possible way a sequel to The Shining could have been done. I'm giving Doctor Sleep an A plus. Does this film hold up to The Shining? No, not by a long shot, but this is a sequel that all fans should look into. And as always, I hope you enjoyed this review. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you in the next video.